It's Christmas Eve. We shouldn't be speaking to you tonight, but in a dramatic last-minute move in negotiations that have gone down to the wire and against all odds, Boris Johnson's grit has won Britain a deal that will take back control. They said he couldn't do it, but today Britain's Prime Minister has proved all his naysayers wrong. Okay, that's all bullshit. You're not watching ITV, you're not watching the BBC. I'm not Robert Peston. As regular viewers of this show will know, I've thought this whole deal or no deal thing has been a pantomime for absolutely ages. And I think, it's been incredibly predictable that this deal would come about. And it's also, I don't think, a coincidence that it's come on Christmas Eve, just as Boris Johnson is desperate to get things out of the headlines, such as Boris Johnson cancelled Christmas or 750 people died yesterday. So in a way, I'm not particularly keen to play up this was a big dramatic moment. However, it is undeniably a significant day because we know for the first time what Britain's future trading relationship with Europe is going to be like. We're going to go through what's actually in the deal this evening, as well as talk about the political fallout, but without any of the theatrics of the political editors of the mainstream channels. I will be joined tonight by Alan Wager from the UK in a Changing Europe think tank. Good evening, Alan. Thank you for joining us on Christmas Eve.
Good evening.
And I'm also going to be I'm also joined by Aaron Bastani. Aaron, thank you for joining us again on Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas.
My pleasure to be with you guys, Michael. It is an important day to cover, so I'm glad we're covering it.
Yeah. You don't have to justify your being here talking about Brexit. It's not something we need to constantly apologise for. Now, we'll go to our first section. After weeks and months of nail-biting late nights or more likely well-choreographed political theatre, the EU and UK have finally gone public with a post-Brexit trade deal. Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, announced the news in Brussels this afternoon.
So we have finally found an agreement. It was a long and winding road, but we have got a good deal to show for it. It is fair, it is a balanced deal, and it is the right and responsible thing to do for both sides. At the end of a successful negotiations journey, I normally feel joy. But today, I only feel quite satisfaction and, frankly speaking, relief. I know this is a difficult day for some. And to our friends in the United Kingdom, I want to say, parting is such sweet sorrow. But to use a line from T.S. Eliot, what we call the beginning is often the end. And to make an end is to make a beginning. So to all Europeans, I say, it is time to leave Brexit behind. Our future is made in Europe. Thank you so much.
Tear-jerking stuff. That was followed shortly after by a press conference from Downing Street.
And so I'm very pleased to tell you this afternoon that we have completed the biggest trade deal yet, worth £660 billion a year, a comprehensive Canada-style free trade deal between the UK and the EU, a deal that will protect jobs across this country, a deal that will allow goods, UK goods and components to be sold without tariffs and without quotas in the EU market, a deal which will, if anything, allow our companies and our exporters to do even more business with our European friends, and yet which achieves something that the people of this country instinctively knew was doable, but which they were told was impossible. We've taken back control of our laws and our destiny. We've taken back control of every jot and tittle of our regulation in a way that is complete and unfettered. From January the 1st, we are outside the customs union and outside the single market. British laws will be made solely by the British Parliament, interpreted by UK judges sitting in UK courts, and the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice will come to an end. We will be able to set our own standards, to innovate in the way that we want, to originate new frameworks for the sectors in which this country leads the world, from biosciences to financial services, artificial intelligence, and beyond.
So we're going to go through those claims that Boris Johnson made point by point in a moment. First of all, what I want to get from Alan is basically a explanation of what meant that this deal could be done now. As I say, I always thought it was a bit of a pantomime, but we're all very used to hearing there were 3 sticking points, there were 3 issues that they had to work out the details for: the level playing field, fish, and any sort of dispute mechanism. What's your analysis of what's happened? What does the deal look like in those 3 key areas?
Well, I mean, yeah, as you're right, the deal could have been made months ago. The sort of sticking points that we had on level playing fields and state aid and fish and so on could have been resolved months ago. It was all sort of up to Boris Johnson to sort of make the political decisions to, if you like, sacrifice those sort of percentages on fishing quotas, and so the UK is accepting that they're going to only take back 25% of fishing waters only, and 5.5 years after January the 1st. So that means that after the next election, the Boris Johnson will be vulnerable to the charge in the future that he hasn't fully taken back control of his waters till then, and onto the level playing field stuff and on state aid. I mean, the UK has ultimately sort of signed up to a mechanism. We don't know how strong the mechanism yet, but a mechanism that will allow sort of tariffs to be implemented on the UK if it veers away from EU regulation. We don't know whether or not how wide those tariffs are going to be. It looks potentially noises coming out of that potentially the deal will mean that cross-sectoral retaliation will be possible. So, you know, if the UK goes in one direction on one thing, the EU will be able to implement tariffs on a whole range of other areas. So basically, yeah. Boris Johnson's caved on most of these things, you know, and you're right. It's probably come a week before Christmas to avoid scrutiny of what he's agreed to.
Let's go through some of the claims that the 2 sides are making of this deal. So I want to start by getting up a graphic from the European Commission. It's been shared very widely. This is obviously them trying to put their spin on the negotiations, which is basically highlighting all the things Britain have lost by leaving the European Union. Obviously, they don't want other people to leave the European Union, so it's obvious they would be highlighting this. So you can see here, they go through the various categories: free movement of people, removal of border checks. In the EU-UK trade deal, you don't get it. As an EU member state, you do get it. Pet passports. As an EU member state, you get it. As a signatory of the EU-UK trade and cooperation agreement, you don't get it. It sort of goes on. Frictionless trade, you don't get it. And with this free trade deal, you do get it if you're an EU member. We can go straight to the other graphic as well. They've got a very long list of things which we are losing out on. So you'll see trade in services, we don't get financial services, passports, etc., air travel, road transport. You can go through these. All of the things that Britain has lost access to, especially Erasmus. I've seen lots of people a bit upset about that on social media today. So Erasmus is when you get to go to a foreign university or a European university on an exchange program. Boris Johnson, for his part, you saw that clip earlier. The sort of key main points he made in that minute and a half we showed you was he was saying this deal will both protect jobs, and he said, I thought somewhat surprisingly, it makes possible even more business with European countries. Presumably the comparison is to what's going on now. I don't know how that would work. And he says that we've taken back control, which, I mean, in his mind, and I mean, there probably is some truth to this. He's saying we can make our own regulations. Yes, they can impose tariffs if they want to, but that's a choice we get to make. And we get to make, is it more important for us to diverge or to not have access to these tariffs? But it's not a case if you have to leave the deal if you want to do a bit of state aid. And he's really highlighting the fact that the European Court of Justice isn't going to have oversight on this. Alan, how much do you think that Boris Johnson's claims stack up there? So he's saying that this is going to protect jobs, increase trade to Europe, and it takes back control because the European Court of Justice aren't in control anymore.
Well, in a narrow sense, the format of it fulfills the sort of promise that Vote Leave made on borders, on control of borders, money and laws and so on. You know, some of the softer promises about the UK being as, you know, prosperous if we left the European Union, they're not going to be fulfilled, but they were never going to be fulfilled. But if you like, the basic elements of the Vote Leave message, you know, are potentially all there. And you know, this sort of Brexit that we've got was really, the stage was set for it or the path was set for it when Theresa May made her conference speech back in 2016. Because what's not in it is anything on the services sector. You know, 80% of the economy, 30 million people work in the services industry. We've got a 28 million 28 billion, surplus with the European Union on the services industry, and that was never going to be in this deal, and that was never going to be in Theresa May's deal. So sort of today, although sort of the UK government wants to make it, a sort of the drama of the last minute, deal or no deal, it does potentially offer an opportunity for us and for the opposition or whatever to really take a step back and say, this deal doesn't contain a whole load of stuff that a lot of people won't realise necessarily that the services sector has been sort of completely avoided in this deal. I mean, so it's basically the slides that the European Union came up with they're pretty much the precursor to them was Michel Barnier came up with this staircase years ago and said if you don't want to have freedom of movement, if you want to have independent control of your trade policy, you'll end up with a sort of Canada minus style agreement, and that's basically what we've ended up with, and that's what we're at today. Is sort of the end product of a series of decisions that were made when Theresa May was interpreting what the referendum meant back in 2016.
I've got a kind of basic question actually, because services always gets brought up and people say it's 80% of the economy, but isn't the point with services that it's mainly stuff you consume? So services like entertainment, haircuts, etc. What services do we export other than like in the City of London? Or is it just really the City of London we're talking about?
Well, I mean, I guess sort of things like architects, if you're a lawyer, if you're an accountant, sort of selling individual services on an individual basis to the European Union market. I mean, we've got a 28 billion surplus with the services industry. I mean, one thing that's often misunderstood is the idea that it's sort of just in London. I mean, 10% of people, for example, in Edinburgh work in the financial services industry. So in the financial services industry, servicing things like mortgages, working in regional offices of banks and so on, is actually something that isn't just based necessarily in the City of London. So it's sort of, and that's it's potentially it's a sector of the economy that a lot of people work in, a lot of people sort of understand. So I think more could and should be made of its absence in all of this discussion about a trade deal with the European Union.
But that could be something that follows on from this, right? So after we've signed this trade deal, which basically refers to goods, we could then have a services trade deal. Is that an argument the government would make?
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. And I think that in the long term, the possibility of further cooperation on financial services, I don't think things like passporting are necessarily that likely. Passporting so the UK has access to sort of banking abroad. It wouldn't necessarily be as likely, but potentially there's further steps that can be made in the services sector that can be built on from this agreement, and that's why people sort of in the services sector are welcoming this because it gives the possibility of further cooperation in the future, if you like.
I'm going to bring in Aaron in one moment to talk about the politics of all of this. First of all, if you're new to the show, make sure you hit subscribe. We go live, well, at the moment, actually, we're on a Christmas break, but after it, we will be going live every Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 7 p.m. And as you'll notice today, sometimes we do these surprise shows because something big has happened, and you'll only find out about those if you subscribe and hit that notification button. Or if you follow us on Twitter, I suppose that's the other option. But do hit subscribe anyway. Right. I want to go to the politics of all of this. So this was, I think, very well choreographed by Boris Johnson. The front pages today have all been about, Boris Johnson striking a deal when for the past few days they have been about chaos at Dover, or, an increasing death toll, or Boris Johnson having cancelled Christmas after saying that would be a terrible thing to do. Let's have a look at the Sun. Their front page this morning sort of looks a bit like something that would come out of North Korea the night before Brexit. Boris poised on trade pact, and sort of if you zoom in on some of the text, it's saying it will also be a personal triumph for PM Boris Johnson, who had promised to get Brexit done. Lots of people saying this is a triumph for Boris Johnson, including actually the BBC political correspondents are saying big triumph for Boris Johnson. You'd expect it from the Sun. But Aaron, I want to bring you in. Boris Johnson is going to be very happy with how all of this is going, isn't he? I mean, when he was stood up in that press conference today, he looked like he was loving life. I mean, it was a little bit distasteful given that 750 people died yesterday, but he seems to be loving life, especially with that picture that he tweeted out as well.
Well, the whole thing about, what was the word you used? I think you were quoting, was it Chris Mason you were quoting from the BBC?
Well, I didn't quote him, but he did say this was a triumph for Boris Johnson, yeah.
Triumph. I mean, if they hadn't got a deal through, that was the sole sort of basis of his electoral mandate in December 2019. So if he hadn't got it through, the idea, this was the sort of the bare essentials of what Johnson had promised in his administration, which was a deal that we would leave by January 31st this year, and that we would get a subsequent agreement going forward with the European Union before the end of this year, which we've done, right? So that I don't think it's an achievement. I think that was just the basics of what he'd been promising 12 months ago. But it is fair to say that, actually look at the content of the agreement. I think Boris Johnson now politically is in a really great place. On the one hand, he's got people like Nigel Farage not really kicking out much of a fuss. He's saying this is effectively a free trade agreement. He's got ERG backbenchers right now are relatively quiet. And then he's got the kind of ultra Remainers who are still saying this is terrible, we should stop Brexit. And the more they keep on saying this is terrible, we should stop Brexit, he can point to them and say, well, look, I've given you everything as Brexiteers, people that wanted this delivered, that you wanted. At the same time, he's got Labour voting for a Brexit deal, which, 18 months ago, 12 months ago, the very same politicians were saying we have to stop Brexit at all costs. So I think there are a few examples in contemporary political history where a single politician like Boris Johnson enters the scene much as he did. We have to remember, only last summer, 18 months ago, the government had no majority. It wasn't going to get a deal through. And where are we now 18 months later? They have an 80 majority. They've got the deal through. But perhaps more importantly, the entirety of sort of establishment common sense is saying this is a great deal. Congratulations. Nobody sort of could have played a better hand. All the way from Keir Starmer and Labour. I know he's not saying that explicitly, but they're going to be literally voting for the deal. All the way through, like you say, to people at the BBC, the Financial Times. Who would have thought, the City of London won't be getting passporting rights, but people like, Sebastian Payne at the Financial Times were saying, this is a great deal. Wow, congratulations. And of course, your guest just a moment ago was right. It's the first step. It can be built upon. But there are certain elements here which, 6 months ago, a year ago, certainly more than a year ago, you'd have expected to be in there. I think city passporting rights was one of them. It isn't. That was a prerequisite, essentially, for the kind of deal that the Tories wanted, which was, out of the single market and effectively a Canada-style trade agreement. They've got that. And I think actually zooming a bit further back, I think somebody like Nigel Farage, he said, the war is over. And for somebody like Nigel Farage, whose entire political brand is based upon a permanent conflict over the European Union, that's a pretty bold statement to make. And I think it's fair to say that the hard Brexiteers really have got absolutely everything they wanted. Absolutely everything. So again, how many instances in contemporary history are there of people winning so much? Now, Boris Johnson, to an extent, is sort of bathing in their sunlight, in their, in what is essentially their victory. He only jumped on this sort of project in 2016, but nevertheless, it really is, I think, a unique set of circumstances for a British Prime Minister to find themselves in.
I'm going to go to a couple of super chats. Alexandra Barahona de Brito. Oh, I hope I got your name right because you've been very generous. €109. Thank you very much. Happy Christmas from Portugal. Viva la Revolution. Big hugs, Alexandra, Alfonso and Carlotta. Thank you so much. Merry Christmas. Robin Clark with $4.99. Thanks for being there when the rest of the media is beige than a Boxing Day buffet. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you, Robin. And Ryan B with a tenner. A fiver for Novara Media. A fiver for Fox. He'll have to speak to the treasurer about that. That's not normally how these donations work, but maybe it's Christmas time. We can work that out. He deserves it. Alan, I want to bring you in because there is this. Labour are now debating whether or not they're going to vote for this deal. It seems they're not actually. That was a bad introduction because Labour have confirmed they are going to vote for this deal. Keir Starmer is going to whip to vote for this deal. I can obviously see the political reasons for doing that. There are people, so I've seen people like James Meadway, Tom Kibasi, who are saying this is a bad deal and they should not vote for it. Now, when I hear this is a bad deal, I mean, as I said, trade deals is not the nitty-gritty of trade deals is not really my obsession. But given the sort of parameters that Boris Johnson set himself and won an election on, is this a bad deal? I mean, it seems like a kind of predictable average deal to me. It doesn't seem terrible or great. It just seems like meh. But is that me not seeing something?
I mean, it is a bad deal in the sense it will have suboptimal sort of outcomes for people that might be felt within the next 12 months. So Tom Kibasi's piece is fantastic. He's arguing that Labour shouldn't vote for the deal. I don't think that's necessarily right, but his broad critique of the deal is correct. And there's potentially short-term repercussions for UK citizens that's going to make the deal less popular than it is in January this year by the summer. I mean, I think the one thing we were thinking about for a lot was the possibility of short-term disruption at Dover being extremely unpopular. I think that's less clear now. I think Leavers could actually see further disruption at Dover as a signal that they've got the sort of hard Brexit they actually really wanted all along. It could actually be a sort of positive symbol to those Leavers that they have actually got a really hard Brexit, so it might be popular among Leavers. So I think that's not as clear. But I think over the next few months, there will be some short-term effects of Brexit that will be negative for UK citizens, and therefore, I think there's clearly it's clearly going to be something that Labour will be able to capitalise on in the next few months if Keir Starmer takes the opportunity.
But you think that I suppose they're going to struggle to capitalise on it if they've whipped a vote for it. That's the argument. I suppose you agree with that.
I don't think inherently it makes it impossible to say that this wasn't our deal. I mean, I think in voters' minds, if they know Keir Starmer, if they knew him before he became Labour leader, was clearly as a sort of Remainer politician, if you like. I think actually, if you like, the voting for the deal actually creates that sort of neutralising position, whereas it's actually sort of basically like abstention. He's a Remainer, but he backed the deal. That's sort of basically saying he's pretty neutral on the issue of Brexit now. I think that's actually potentially the best way forward. And I don't think it's impossible to critique the deal while also voting in favour of it. I mean, if the Conservative Party say every time, if they start saying, oh, you backed the deal, therefore you can't criticise this rubbish deal, that doesn't really work. I mean, that just sort of reminds some of those Leave voters, some of those red wall voters, if you like, that Labour has voted for this Brexit deal. I don't think the Conservative Party is going to want to do that. So I think that can be over exaggerated, the sort of political impact of Labour voting for this next week.
Aaron, what do you make of Keir Starmer whipping Labour MPs to vote for it? Political masterstroke, best of bad options.
I think it's politically coherent. I agree with Alan to that extent, but I think the argument which is being regurgitated ad infinitum by the shadow front bench, and they all seem to be basically working off a model tweet, which is, it's either this deal or no deal. That's irresponsible, so we're going to push this through. And of course, it's not this deal or no deal because the Conservatives have a majority of 80. And it doesn't look in any meaningful sense like they have a rebellion on their hands which could jeopardize the deal. And so the reality is they're doing what they're doing precisely for the reasons Alan's just pointed out, which is effectively political optics and neutralizing what has been a very toxic issue for the party over the last several years. And my misgiving on this is that they could just say that. But instead you have people who are walking around wearing, we have to remember Emily Thornberry on a protest with Keir Starmer, last year, wearing a necklace which was meant to represent the member states of the European Union, now saying something which is completely untrue. And while it is accurate to say that this could to some extent neutralize the issue with sort of red wall voters, I also think it's true that it could feed into, in a drip sense, the idea that Keir Starmer doesn't really have any core political values. This is somebody who will abstain on one thing, says something else, wanted Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister, was serving in a shadow cabinet, yet, says actually he doesn't merit even now being a member of the parliamentary party, was Mr. Remain, now he's voting for Boris Johnson's deal. Why didn't he just vote for Theresa May's deal? Surely no deal was more possible then than now because the Tories didn't have a majority, now they do. So I think that's where the political danger comes in here for Starmer. That's not to say it will happen, but I think he can be sort of represented as a bit of a flip-flopper. However, that's probably not as bad as the alternative, which, as Alan is saying, effectively to be viewed as a kind of, one of these Japanese-style, soldiers from the Second World War who are still fighting in an island off Okinawa in 1962. He doesn't want to do that. He wants to get Brexit behind him, so I can understand it, but I think the way it's being delivered, a bit dodgy.
The problem for Starmer with the ERG not seeming to organise around opposition to the deal at all means that it's very hard to sustain the idea that there's really a no-deal option, because if you had sort of 40, 50 ERGers, you could make a sort of superficial case that we have to vote for this because we have this majority of 80. That's not possible. And it also means that there's nobody making the case against the deal from a position where they're going to vote against it. So you've now got basically nobody making that case. And I think Labour would have been assuming there would have been some significant members of the ERG at least making the case from a position where they were going to actually vote against it in the House of Commons. And now no one is. Well, maybe the Lib Dems are going to vote against it, but
Yeah, the Lib Dems are going to be leading the fight again.
again.
I want to talk a bit about the media coverage of this. Now, someone tweeted afterwards, is Michael going to do a show just so he can gloat? Because he said that a deal was always going to happen. As I said, Christmas is not a time for gloating, but it probably is a time to hold some of our highest paid political editors to account, because many of the most high profile public figures who are supposed to be journalists in this country have spent the last few months just saying, oh, is there going to be a deal? Oh, no, there's not going to be a deal. And then sort of the middle of the night, you've got Laura Kuenssberg saying, oh, I've just been told a deal's going to happen within 2 hours. Oh, no, actually, it's going to be 24 hours. It's not really journalism, it's commentary. Anyway, my favourite example throughout this whole period has been Robert Peston. We're going to go through some of his tweets leading up to this moment, trying to dramatise it as much as possible. A classic one back on the 10th of December. As I said on #Peston and ITV News at 10 last night, I can't see the landing zone that delivers a free trade deal between UK and EU. Talking to both sides, it is clear that the gap on the level playing field is ideological, not pragmatic. No deal is overwhelmingly likely. That was what was being spun to him by Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson wanted people to just be comparing no deal to the deal, and he wanted this to be dramatic. He likes to be the star of the show. Robert Peston was helping him. Now, I want to go to the most ridiculous example of this, though, because this was on Tuesday, where you literally saw Robert Peston being played by sources in Downing Street in real time. So he tweeted, first of all, this is on Tuesday today, and it is confirmed. There is no chance of a deal before Christmas, but apparently there is still a chance a deal can be agreed in time to be ratified in the UK Parliament by 11 p.m, 31st of December. I am told the talks are now like a chess game with few pieces left on the board. Who wins? So his big claim there is confirmed. There is no chance of a deal before Christmas. Then 3 hours later, right, he quote tweets this tweet with a follow-up. Oh God, I can't believe I'm saying this, but a UK source now says agreement on a UK-EU trade deal is again possible tomorrow, presumably because, says a separate source, there was movement late tonight on access to the 6 to 12 mile zone, ocean fishing, and the sanctions. Now, this is, I'm surprised, if you're going to get played like this by politicians and by, well, these are probably advisors to Boris Johnson, I wouldn't do it so publicly. I don't really understand how he's not embarrassed to be doing like, oh, I'm told it's confirmed, it's absolutely not going to happen. And then 3 hours later, it's like, oh shit, no, it is going to happen. It's like, maybe just shut up for a while and actually try and work out what's going on. My serious question for you though here, Alan, is I think, something we've been saying on this show, something like what people like Tom Kabassi have been saying is that all of this commentary on is it going to be a deal or is it going to be no deal, sort of treating it as a sport, I think it's a bit like professional wrestling. It's clearly fake, but the commentators of fake wrestling don't point out it's fake because their job is to make it as exciting as possible. The fact that the commentary has been of that type does mean there has been less scrutiny on the actual deal, which I think probably has been to Boris Johnson's benefit. I mean, it's difficult to see how it wouldn't be. If there had been, this is my question to you, Alan, if there had been more grown-up coverage of this, where people were actually scrutinising what was in the deal, what parts of it do you think could have become politically problematic for Boris Johnson? Where do you think he's got off lightly because of the way this has been dealt with by Robert Peston, Laura Kuenssberg, etc.?
Well, within the last week of negotiations, the UK's compromise on fish looked pretty insurmountable, the sort of fish issue, because the UK was asking for 80% of the stock, and the EU was asking for 20%, and we've ended up with 25%, right? So the UK is basically caved en masse to the European Union on the issue of fish, meant to be this big sort of symbolic totemic issue. I mean, on level playing field and so on. Partly as a result of the no deal, and partly as a result of this idea of lightning tariffs that entered pretty quickly, pretty towards the end of negotiations, in the sort of rhetoric around whether or not we get a deal. This idea that the UK, that the EU will be able to unilaterally impose tariffs on the UK. That was sort of what was pushed. That's not going to be possible, but you have pretty much everything but that. You have a situation where if the UK diverges from EU rules, it will go to an independent body that will ultimately make a decision that the UK should be punished for not abiding by EU rules. So we're in a situation where, for all intents and purposes, unless we don't want a tariff-free agreement anymore with the European Union, we are remaining within the European Union's, economic orbit, and no one's really sort of asking that sort of more existential question: are we in or out of the European Union's economic orbit yet? And that's because Boris Johnson actually can't answer that, because at the moment, with the deal that's on the table, the UK it was going to be very difficult for the UK to sort of deregulate in the way that many of his backbenchers want. That's not to say they won't try, but actually at the moment, the deal sort of leaves the UK within the European Union's, economic orbit, if you like, and that's not really been understood, I think, enough in the discussion within his party and within the media.
And Aaron, my final question is going to go to you. We're doing a shorter show tonight because it's Christmas. Aaron, I've sort of pointed out how Pest and Koonsberg, etc., have been doing that. Is it going to be a deal? Is it going to be a no deal? No deal will be a catastrophe. So let's hope we get a deal, without really paying much attention to what's actually in the deal. Obviously, it's not just political editors who have done that. The Labour Party have taken the same line. And in fact, actually, the entire Remain movement seems to have taken the whole line, which is deal is fine, no deal is bad. So are you surprised at the amount to which, it seems like the whole political class in this country has brought into what I think is a bit of a hoax, that that a no deal was genuinely on offer? Why has everyone been so, I suppose, swept away in this narrative?
It's an amazing question. I mean, when you think about it, people thought, I think it seems to me that most people thought, I don't mean people as in, Joe Blogs out on the street. I mean, journalists, politicians, policymakers seem to think that so there's two elements to this, right? There was the withdrawal agreement leaving the European Union, there was the transition arrangement, and then there was obviously what we had going forward. People seem to think that basically the withdrawal agreement was the point of no deal. And I think in the kind of final months of 2019, people said, actually, there's this thing where there's transitional arrangement, and actually you have another year to effectively work out what kind of arrangements you want going forward. Of course, some people talked about this, like Tom Kibasi, but I would talk to him and I would say, well, do like Labour MPs who are dissenting with Corbyn, do they not know about that? And he said, I don't think so. Or, Best for Britain and all these kinds of big Remainer NGOs. And I think if they did know, it was kind of convenient to kind of not really think about it too deeply. And I think you're right. The prospect of no deal was always highly improbable. And even if there wasn't a deal agreed this year, by the way, I just think things, I mean, maybe our other guest this evening, Alan, can talk about that. I think it should have been kicked a bit further forward. There would have been another transitional deal for 3 months or 6 months, or you would have had a deal on some areas for 3 months and not others. So again, this whole idea of no deal, the category of no deal, on this particular day, we will leave with no agreement on things like aviation, transit routes in and out of the country. That was never, ever, 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 ever going to happen. Never, never, never. It served an incredibly convenient political purpose for the Conservative Party to dangle that in the air, because it served two things. Firstly, to expedite the process of leaving the European Union. Secondly, any deal which they did get, which would be a bad deal, compared to no deal at all, even by, the estimations of people like Best for Britain and the Remainiacs and all these people, well, this is fantastic. By contrast, at least we've got this. So it was always a win-win for the Brexiteers, that this kind of concept of no deal was just completely swallowed, even by the people that sort of disagreed with them the most. I have to say, it's a shame that more people didn't have the sort of the strategic astuteness of a Tom Kibasi. I think he's got a lot right when it came to Brexit. When he said we can move away from a single market to have a shared market, when he talked about the prospect of no deal not really being the real thing. And also, I think when he said some really uncomfortable truths for the kind of hardcore Remainers, we've all now learned the hard way. A lot of people leading that movement got a lot of things wrong. And before I sort of finish there, I'll say also that Labour got a lot of things wrong under Jeremy Corbyn. There is a really serious argument or discussion to be had about should Labour under Jeremy Corbyn have accepted Theresa May's deal. Because as I've just said, the withdrawal agreement wasn't really Brexit. It was really the first step on this journey moving forward. And I think us on the left have to take some responsibility for that. I do think there were people on the left who said, some more than others, who said, there is no way Labour can ever, ever, ever back Theresa May's deal. I think some of that is because we didn't really understand the ins and outs of this entire thing. But I think also it meant there was a certain vacuum within the Corbyn leadership who should have been clearer and said, actually, we can do X, Y, Z. These are the options available to us. And despite the media all grabbing this idea of no deal, etc., it's not really what they're saying it is. That never happened. So that vacuum of leadership, I think, also, created some of the circumstances to allow us to arrive where we are today.
It's potentially, I've just had a thought actually that Keir Starmer's style of opposition tends to be to demand something that he knows is going to happen anyway. You know, so you often see him. I keep seeing this on Twitter where something bad happens, you know, like the new strain emerges and Keir Starmer tweets, "I demand Boris Johnson hold a press conference." And then 20 minutes later, Boris Johnson announces a press conference. It's all like, you just demand things that you know are going to happen anyway. So you could see the whole, "I demand there to be a deal" in a similar way. He can say, "A victory we got is that we demanded a deal. And now there's a deal." That's real opposition.
Can I just say, I genuinely think if Keir Starmer was, and this is not an attack on Keir Starmer, I've just said it maybe was the right thing to do. I do think if Keir Starmer had been a Labour Party leader in 2018, 2019, I think he would have backed Theresa May's deal. I genuinely think that. I think pretty much any other political leader would not have come under the pressure that Jeremy Corbyn did to go against it.
Yeah, there's a perfect storm of people who saw that there was an unstrategic position to take and wanted Corbyn to take it for that very reason. They were absolutely willing to take that risk. Right, Chris Jarvis with a tenner. We're going to some super chats. Merry Christmas to all at Novara after a year of brilliant coverage. With the deal now done, can our politics move beyond Brexit as a distorting and defining culture war issue? It's a very interesting question. Potentially. I mean, I suppose Labour are going to be worried that if it does, you know, there's going to be a vaccine next year. Presumably there's going to be a big, you know, economic bounce. Brexit is over, and who are people going to credit with ending Brexit? Not Keir Starmer. They're going to credit Boris Johnson. So, you know, that could go either way. But, yeah, we're not going to miss it as a topic. Pass the lemon. And obviously it's not going to end as a topic because, as Alan says, there's going to be now deals about services, etc. Pass the lemon with £11.11. Been following Novara since 2016. You've got me through 2 general elections and become my go-to news channel in 2020. Proud to say I've finally become a supporter. Thanks for your hard work. And here's to a Falk 2021. That's a fully automated luxury communism. I'm sure all of our audience know that. Buy the book, Aaron Bastani. Very good. Great stocking filler, although it's probably a little bit too late for that now. And James Corbyn with a tenner. Well done, Novara, smashing it in the thousands. Same day, Labour managed to get 143 watching Keir Starmer's prime lifetime stream on YouTube. I was aware that stream was happening. I missed that one. I don't know how I've managed to do that. Maybe it coincided with ours. For now, though, Alan, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Have a Merry Christmas.
You too.
Aaron, thank you so much for joining me this evening on Christmas Eve. You're always there, whatever the date, whenever something big happens, you know, to run us down what really matters. Have a very Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. I love seeing your dog as well. I was going to say Merry Christmas to your dog. And I'm like, well, now I have to say Merry Christmas to your fiance. Merry Christmas to the whole Bastani household.
I feel like Goose to your Maverick. I'm always here for you, Michael.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
If people who watch Top Gun, they know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't get the reference. I'll have to look it up afterwards. And thank you to all of our audience for being with us tonight, for being with us throughout the year. Thank you so much for all of your super chats. Have an amazing Christmas, presumably a bit smaller than usual, but I hope it's, you know, relaxing. Maybe it's more relaxing than usual, actually. Take advantage of the fact. We will be back sometime soon. Tysky Sour will be starting regularly from the 4th of January. Depends what happens in between now and then. If you see us between now and then, we've been putting out videos every day as well. The 12 days of Tysky, different clips we've been doing from every month of the year. So loads of content for you. For now, have a Merry Christmas. You've been watching Tysky Sour on Novara Media. Good night.